prophecies of the transatlantic slave trade is lesson we did. We already have 3 parts in it already, but we have to bring this forward first so we could be more clear and more understood as to when we go through these things and we make mentions of these things, it's already recorded and it's already placed on the page, which you can just go back and take a look, take a read, understand the information, and be aware of what it is. All right, so second Ezra chapter 39 verses 14. Let's get to the story as to what happened during the Assyrian, right? It says, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land, which was mentioned in 2 Kings, in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. What they do? They came into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, because remember they were removed from Samaria into where? Another land. So this is where it continues. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen which had them in captive, and go forth into further countries where never mankind dwelt. In other words, land of the unknown. All right, just remember the land of the unknown. Let's continue. It says, right. It says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their land, their own land. So they're going on what? In other words, they're trying or doing so to repent, right, against what they have done against Yahweh Shem Yoshai, and separate themselves from these wicked nations to do what? Show the Yahweh Shem Yoshai that their devotion towards him, basically. All right. It says, which they never kept in their own land, which is the whole land which they were removed from. It says, and they entered into Euphrates by the narrow place of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. It says, so in other words, oh my God, I think there's a precept. I don't want to go into too much, but there's a precept I know. There was a precept I was looking for dealing with the seas, or something concerned for the seas, and I can't remember the precept, so I'll continue. If you come to me, come to me. So let's continue. Verse 44, it says, the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. Alright? It says, for through the countries there was a great war to go, namely of a year and a half. And the same region is Asarat. Now, the reason why I want to go in, I had to get that understand, because when you go into what used to take place during the time of Solomon as ruling, because I don't want to butcher it too much, but I'm going to get some information, make some precepts, because we have to remember the Tyre and Zidon, which was one of the nations that was used to bring things like cedar and all other manner of let's call it, I forget it's a name for it, like I'm gonna get it was cedar trees and gold, and according to all his decree, as well as things like turkeys or peacocks, which is or was an oscillated turkeys, which we mentioned before in a lesson before. So let me get some information here. Let's start with Genesis before I continue, because this is very important to note. That notice how the Hamites back then, along with many of our people, would have knew where they had to go to get these things, which is a land that was not inhabited by human beings. It was merely visited to receive to receive resources, and that was it. And I can show you that in scriptures. Like go Genesis chapter 49 and verses 13. Dealing with the prophecy that it says, dealing with Zebulun, we know Zebulun are. It says, Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be a haven of ships. Right? And his borders shall be unto Zidon. Now, the borders, or let's say the haven of the sea goes into the seashore, the coast, because when they get in, let me get the next translation, right? So you could see for yourself. Genesis chapter 49, again, Salak for verse 13. It says in NLT, it says Zebulun was settled by the seashore, you see, and be a harbor for ships. His borders will extend to Zidon, right? So let's go into that word again, which is seashore or coast or shore. And the definition, let me get the
Strong's H2348. Hof.
What?
Hof.
Okay, I didn't.
And the form just below that, Hof.
The same thing. Okay.
Hof.
So it's the same thing. It's okay. It's Hof, but transliteration is hopes, but it's Hof, not hope. Hof. Anyways, right. So, right. It says unused root meaning to cover a cove or a sheltered bay, coast of the sea, haven, shore, or seaside. All right. So you understand where it's going to the seashore, the coast. That's where you play, where the vessels are usually placed, right? This is what it's going into. So let's go back into it in Salak. Trying to burn the gas. Salak. So, and the reason I want to add to that is because look at where the Zidon, Tyre and Zidon would have been, right? So let's get 1 Kings real quick. Chapter 9 and verses 11 as to where the Hamitic nations would have brought, I would say, rewards for the king. And it says, now Hiram, the king of Tyre, had furnished Solomon with cedar trees and fir trees, and with gold, and according to all his desire. That then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. All right. Now, as you continue, it says, now pay attention to this. It says, and Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. Right. But let's just go down to the main part, is verses 27. So it's 21. I think that's probably just highlighted here. Well, no, that's not this for sure. Not this. This is it here, right? So, right. So let's read as you continue from verses 27, and it says, and Hiram sent. Now this is knowledge, because it says Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. So you see that? So servants of Solomon, along with the shipmen from Hiram. All right, two different nations, of course. So hint, right? Now let's get the time frame in which they would have traveled. All right, which exactly was mentioned in 2nd Ezra, showing the scriptures to be true, right? Coinciding, to be exact. Let's go 1 King chapter 10 and verses 22. Direct precept, as it says. All right, it says, about 22. It says, no, is it this? Yeah, right here. It says, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. Right? So when you look at the time frame, when you go back into also when you go back into Second Ezra chapter 13 and verses 45, I believe, which we read, right? It says, through the countries there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Aserat. Now they would, in order to reach that land of the unknown, which we know as Aserat, you would have to reach there for what? The time frame which you reach there would be about 1 year and a half, and the same time to come back would have been 1 year also and a half. So you see how the time kind of coincides together. So with the voyage back then would have been 3 years, which is 1 year and a half to reach, gather the items, and 1 year and a half to come back. And they would have had, of course, people, I would say servants, gathering the resources to. So it's a easy come and go to bring back. It's not a hassle to do so. All right, this is what has been done. So it was not inhabited, but it was merely visited at the time to access resources. Because a very clear example to that is the oscillated turkeys, which when they go into the definition of the word peacock, that's what it goes into. Now, let me go into it really quick to make it very much clear, right? Which First King chapter 10 and verses 22 deal with the peacocks, right? When you go into this, peacocks there. Let's go into it. Right, and immediately.
Strong's H 8500. Tukiyim.
Right.
Tukiyim. And second entry. Tukiyim. Tukiyim. And third entry.
Right.
Tukiyim.
Right.
Tukiyim.
So let me get access to some information so you can see what this is going in. Let's get some information right here real quick. We'll just browse through quick. It says, dealing with 1 King chapter 10 and verses 22, which I delved into the word peacock. It says the peacock mentioned here comes from a Hebrew term that probably referred to exotic birds imported from India or nearby regions in the ancient world. Solomon's court was known for collecting rare, luxurious items from distant lands. And as we know, this is my own words I'm going to add, as we know, a oscillated turkey would be a very rare animal that would have been given from that particular land, because this bird peacock, when they go into it a little bit more, also was mentioned to be what? Let's read it. It says, now about the connection to turkey, this modern bird we call a turkey is a native to the Americas and was unknown in the old world until after Columbus, so it could not be what Solomon had. Listen, the word turkey for the bird came later. Oh my goodness, came later from European tradition and trading in the New World bird through Turkey or Turkish merchants, hence the name. But this is entirely a linguistic coincidence, which we know there's not. Peacock in Kings 10 and verse 22 is an old bird, likely a true peacock or a related exotic bird like a pheasant, parts of the fancy that's kind of word family, right? Or same family as a peafowl or and turkeys. But here's the point: the peafowls, which we did a lesson on before, and the turkey, this is what I mentioned here. The peafowls on the turkey, and the peafowls, which were known as the turkeys in the time of Solomon when he received them, were actually straight descendants of oscillated turkeys. And the only ways to, and this is a lesson you can grab on my page, literally. The only way that you can get access to these birds is going into where? America. Notice how it comes out. It doesn't rule out, because if these birds are direct descendants of the ocellated turkeys, which is mentioned to be, which is heavily resembles peacock. We did pages and pictures to show this as well. That would mean that in order for you to access these same birds mentioned, like the peacock, mentioned as turkey, or going to with turkey, or in the peafowl families, it's then you have to go back to the place where you can get these birds that is indigenous to this particular region, which still cannot rule out what is mentioned here. So either way, you either have to side with it or you don't side with it. But if you don't side with it, in order to get the bird, you have to go back to the land to get the bird. And if the only way you can not side with it is by saying, the name wasn't so at the point in time. Yes, we agree to that, no problem. So you see how this thing Slack. Stay tuned to the next lesson. Shalom.